Mom, guess what I learned in school today?
What, sweetie?
I learned how a prince married a prince, and I can marry a princess.
Think it can happen? It's already happened. When Massachusetts legalized gay marriage, schools began teaching second graders that boys can marry boys. The courts ruled parents had no right to object.
Under California law, public schools instruct kids about marriage. Teaching children about gay marriage will happen here unless we pass Proposition 8. Yes on 8.
Chris and Sandy, one night after work, had to sit down in the family room, which they never do, so of course we knew something terrible was going to happen, or something really fun. So we sat down and Chris was like, I was approached and asked if I wanted to be part of this case. And I'm, okay, what case? And she says it was whether to see if Proposition 8 was unconstitutional or not.
But I would have soccer practice and soccer games throughout the entire week. Then also be playing club soccer, so it was basically, I would have to miss a lot of that.
Yeah, and I'm a competitive fencer, so, well, you associate the word activism with people who, with signs and not extremists, but people who, well, when I think of Chris and Sandy, I think of people who not humble, but, people who don't want to force their views on people.
I mean, we thought our parents were married.
Yeah.
That's how they explained it to us. So when we think of marriage, we think of Chris and Sandy, we think of our parents. But I know for a fact that there's a lot of kids in my school who don't want to see them as married.
So what do we expect? I mean, I've never been in a courtroom where my parents are testifying against their own government. I honestly can't tell you, because I think they might be shattered with what's going to happen.
Calling Civil Case 09-2292, Kristen Perry versus Arnold Schwarzenegger. Appearances, counsel, please.
Say all rise.
All rise.
On Election Day 2008, Californians voted in favor of Proposition 8, thus rewriting the California state constitution to add a ban on marriage for gay and lesbian citizens who were already enjoying that right. Well, now two lawyers, most famous for representing opposing sides of Bush v. Gore, have teamed up to take Proposition 8 to federal court.
Good morning, Your Honor. Theodore B. Olson on behalf of the plaintiffs.
Good morning.
Good morning, Your Honor. David Boyes on behalf of the plaintiff.
Chief Judge Vaughn Walker, a Republican appointee, agreed with Mr. Boyes and Mr. Olson that the case could be broadcast, but the defendants, the opponents of gay marriage, turned to Charles Cooper.
Good morning, Mr. Chief Judge. Charles Cooper for the defendant interveners.
Mr. Cooper filed an appeal with the U.S. Supreme Court, which was successful, and the Supreme Court blocked plans to broadcast the trial, and thus the nation was denied access to the testimony of plaintiffs Jeff Zerillo and Paul Katami and Sandy Steer and Chris Perry. But the transcripts of this trial could not be hidden. And on June 16, 2010, the closing arguments of this historic case commenced. These are the words, the witnesses, the testimony, and the trial the defenders of Proposition 8 have fought so hard to keep from public view.
Mom, right here.
Did you get through security okay?
Yeah, obviously.
So why didn't you come in with everyone else?
They took us in a back way, around all the press.
Did you talk to any of the cameras?
Yeah.
And?
I just said this case is about us as Americans wanting to be treated equally by our government, and under the law, we are going into court today with that simple request.
You did it like that?
What's wrong with that?
I mean, you seem really nervous.
Come on, cell phones off. Come on, let's go find our seats.
Wait, were we done in time for soccer practice?
I'm not sure. Come on, let's go. Let's go.
What do you mean you're not sure?
Well, who knew we were going to go through an actual trial, Elliot? I mean, who knows what we're going to have to do today? Because personally, I have never sued Arnold Schwarzenegger before. Now, move it.
Obviously, the hiatus that we've had is not anything that I would have hoped for. But it may be appropriate that the case is coming to closing argument now. June is, after all, the month for weddings. So I would simply propose that we get right to business. Mr. Olson, are you leading off for the plaintiff?
I am, Your Honor. May it please the court. We conclude this trial, Your Honor, where it began. This case is about marriage and equality. The fundamental constitutional right to marry has been taken away from the plaintiffs and tens of thousands of similarly situated Californians. This state has rewritten its constitution in order to place them into a special disfavored category, where their most intimate personal relationships are not valid, not recognized, and second-rate. I'm going to, with your permission, Your Honor, play some excerpts from the testimony of the plaintiffs.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you tell us briefly about your background?
I was born in Illinois, but my parents moved here with me when I was 2 years old.
Well, I grew up on a farm in southern Iowa, going to public schools.
I am the executive director of a statewide agency that provides services and support to families with children 0 to 5.
Now, today you are in a committed relationship with another gay man, correct?
I have found someone that I know I can dedicate the rest of my life to. And when you find someone who is not only your best friend, but your best advocate and supporter in life, it's a natural next step for me to want to marry that person.
March will be 9 years.
Sandy and I live together in Berkeley with our children.
We each bring 2 biological children to our family and each other, our 2 younger sons in high school.
I remember the first time I met Sandy thinking she was maybe the sparkliest person I ever met. And our friendship became deeper and deeper over time. And then after a few years, I began to feel that I might be falling in love with her.
And how did she feel about you?
Well, she told me that she loved me too.
We will be asking her to verify that.
Okay.
It's always an awkward situation at the front desk of the hotel. The individual working at the desk will look at us perplexed. You ordered a king-size bed. Is that really what you want? And it was certainly an awkward situation walking into the bank and saying, my partner and I want to open a joint bank account, and hearing, a business account?
An LLC or an S corporation? No, not my business partner, my partner. Being able to call him my husband is so definitive. It's something that everyone understands.
I'm a 45-year-old woman, and I have been in love with a woman for 10 years. And I don't have a word to tell anybody about that.
The word marriage has a meaning. If it wasn't so important, we wouldn't be here today.
It symbolizes maybe the most important decision you make as an adult, who you choose.
Unless you have to go through that constant validation of self, there's no way to really describe how it feels. I love Jeff more than myself. And being excluded in that way is so incredibly harmful to me. I can't speak as an expert. I can speak as a human being that's lived it.
Opponents of Prop 8 said gay marriage has nothing to do with schools. Then a public school took first graders to a lesbian wedding, calling it a teachable moment. Now this politician says schools aren't required to teach about marriage. Yet his official website confirms teaching marriage is required in 96% of schools. And a leading Prop 8 opponent has warned parents cannot remove children from this instruction. Unless we vote yes on Proposition 8, children will be taught about gay marriage.
Whether you like it or not. Your Honor, the words they put into the hands of California voters focused heavily on protect our children. Protect our children from somehow learning that gay marriage is okay, that there is something wrong, sinister, or unusual about gays, and their relationships are not okay and decidedly not suitable for children. For obvious reasons, however, the gays are not okay message was largely abandoned during this trial in favor of procreation and deinstitutionalization themes. And I submit that the overwhelming evidence in this case proves that allowing persons to marry someone of the same sex will not in the slightest deter heterosexuals from marrying or from having babies.
Well, they have identified a difference between opposite sex and same-sex couples in that opposite sex couples can procreate without the intervention of some third party. Why is that difference not one that the voters could rationally take into account?
Your Honor, you'd have to make some statement that allowing these other individuals to engage in the institution of marriage will somehow stop that procreation or stop people from getting married or cause them to get divorced. If we had time, Your Honor, I could not present a more compelling closing argument than simply replaying the testimony in its entirety of the four plaintiffs. But we have so much more. There are 8 experts, Your Honor, persons who have studied and written about American history, marriage, psychology, sociology, economics, and political science. Professor Koch, for example, an expert in marriage.
Marriage, the ability to marry, to say I do, is a basic civil right. It expresses the right of a person to have the liberty to consent validly. And this can be seen very strikingly in American history through the fact that slaves lacked that very basic liberty of person to say I do with the force that I do has to have.
And what happened when slaves were emancipated?
When slaves were emancipated, they flocked to get married. It was said by an ex-slave who had also been a Union soldier, the marriage covenant is the foundation of all our rights, meaning that it was the most everyday exhibit of the fact that he was a free person.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Cooper, you may cross-examine.
In the 19th century, many Americans engaged in informal marriages, correct?
That is true.
And pregnancy or childbirth was the signal for a couple to consider themselves married, correct?
Well, not always, sometimes.
Well, let's look at public vows. Your book, which has been admitted, page 31.
Page 31, you said?
It reads in part, marriage frequently followed upon a sexual relationship between a man and a woman proving fruitful rather than preceding it. Pregnancy or childbirth was the signal for a couple to consider themselves married. You believed that when you wrote these words, didn't you?
Well, yes, but as I said, frequently, not always.
And you provided a statement to the Vermont legislature when it was considering same-sex marriage.
Not to the legislature, to their joint judiciary committee.
I see. And when you provided that statement in Vermont, the law that resulted was a compromise between Catholics, gave something to Catholics and other conservative groups and something to the LGBT community. Is that correct?
It did state in its first line, marriage is between a man and a woman. And then it went on to grant a civil union arrangement that gave all the rights and benefits to same-sex couples. Yes.
Your Honor, we have no further questions. Thank you, Professor.
A civil union? A domestic partnership would relegate me to a level of second-class citizenship, maybe even third-class citizenship. It doesn't give due respect to the relationship that we've had for almost 9 years. Only marriage could do that.
Husband is definitive. It's something that everyone understands. There is no subtlety to it. It is absolute, and it comes with the understanding that your relationship is not temporal, it's not new, it's not something that could fade easily. We would love to have a family, but the timeline for us has always been marriage first because it solidifies the relationship. And we gain access to that language that is global, where it won't affect our children in the future. They won't have to say, my dad and dad are domestic partners, because truth is, not everyone knows what a domestic partnership is. We want our children to be protected from any awkwardness like that. We want to focus on raising our kids.
I think it's quite clear that the young children do not aspire to be domestic partners. For young people, and certainly for people later on, marriage is a desirable and respected type of goal that if you attain it, it's something that gives you pride and respect.
Dr. Meyer, as one of the leading experts on stigma and discrimination, do you have an opinion as to whether domestic partnerships enjoy similar symbolic and social meaning?
In my mind, Proposition 8, in its social meaning, sends a message that gay relationships are not to be respected, that they are of secondary value, if any value at all, that they are certainly not equal to those of heterosexuals. And to me, that's, in addition to not allowing gay people to marry, it also sends a strong message about the values of the state, and in this case, the Constitution itself.
Are you aware that same-sex marriage has been legal since 2004 in Massachusetts?
Yes.
Do LGBT individuals suffer from a lower prevalence of mental health disorders in Massachusetts than in California?
The first answer is I don't really know, but that's not how. I wouldn't expect it exactly in that way that you're suggesting, that that would be the test of that, because Massachusetts is not an isolate of the United States. And certainly I would think that people in Massachusetts who are gay would feel more supported and welcome, so to speak.
But your answer is you don't know, correct?
Well, I don't have data on that.
You don't have data.